Something that I love so much about menstrual cycle awareness and cycle coaching is the opportunity to understand myself. It has been for me the biggest tool to really get to know who I am. And like I said earlier, to get to know who I am in each phase of my menstrual cycle. And also as I continue to go through my life in each phase of my life. With this knowledge, I can look back and get to know more about who I was as a maiden and now who I am as a mother. Welcome to the Cycle Coach Show. Empowering conversations on menstrual cycle coaching. We're your hosts, Claire Baker and Lauren Olivia Hughes. Welcome back to the Cycle Coach Show. We are your hosts, Claire Baker and Lauren Olivia Hughes, and you've made it to the end of season 2. This is our finale episode. I don't think either of us can believe it, but here we are, right on the solstice, actually, the mid-year solstice, and I'm thrilled to be here with you, Lauren. Shall we start with a check-in?
Yes. I can't believe we're finally recording the finale episode. I think there's a few attempts made, and it was meant to be closer to the solstice. So it feels beautiful to finally connect. Cycle day, I have no idea because I'm 38 weeks pregnant. I'll be interested. I can't remember where I started. I think I was 34 weeks. So it's, a 2-month passage of time since we started recording season 2, and officially in that window of any time now. I still think it's going to be a few weeks, but definitely feeling... as I said before, a bit swollen, a bit keen for the next chapter, but also relishing this time because everyone says like, oh, just rest, like get all your sleep in that you can now. And it's just like my brain is quite bored with this waiting period. So I'm trying to look into my inbox to see if there's any courses that I purchased and haven't done yet or anything I can learn, books that I could find and read because I don't even have a good book on the go right now. It's just like, okay, how do I, keep my brain engaged and excited before my world turns upside down in a few weeks? And I'm a mom, which is also weird. And haven't fully wrapped my brain around that either. And I don't know if that's something you can do before the day. So feeling a bag of emotions. How are you feeling?
Oh my gosh, I bet.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I'm curious, your current experience of waiting for baby to arrive, which part of your menstrual cycle, does it remind you of, if any? Are there any patterns?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I was also thinking of that in relation to like the interview you did with Monique, which was brilliant, about the phases over pregnancy. And for me right now, this period reminds me of like when my cycle is a bit longer. So I've like ovulated a bit later. And so my cycle's a bit longer than usual. Either I'm like very, very tired by the last few days, or I've had a few cycles where I feel like maybe I'm just not going to have a period. And maybe I'm just like back on this, like in that inner spring energy. And maybe it's just like I've skipped the period. It's like, I know that's physiologically like not possible, but I feel like that's where I'm at right now, where it's just like I've been pregnant for 9 months now, and it's been like a very expansive experience. And my brain's like, okay, what's the next little thing? And I'm like, maybe I should do crafts. Maybe I should start a new project. Maybe I should there's this like very spring-like energy in my brain where I'm just ready to do the next thing, I suppose, and to almost like skip over menstruation, or I suppose in this case, birth. But you can't skip, apparently.
Yeah, I get the feeling that's a portal that you will be required to walk through.
Yeah. A little portal to walk through, yeah. No, and I am looking forward. I am looking forward to that experience genuinely as well, because it's been 9 months of being in awe of my body and how it's transformed, and it's confirmed everything I've ever thought about women, which is like we're goddesses and deserve to be worshipped every day.
Yeah, beautiful, powerful stuff. I'm so excited for you and what's going to transform in your life over the next few weeks.
It'll be weird. I have like a mini version of myself out in the world.
Yeah. I'm on cycle day 23, and that places me, I'm going to say about 4 days away from bleeding. I felt a bit of an upkick in my energy today, which is about right as well. Although at this point in my cycle, I can be yeah, very creative and productive, which I've definitely been the last couple of days, but it's all going to happen from my like bed or on the couch in pajamas. Like I didn't get out of my pajamas until 2 o'clock today, right? Like it's just like cozy, like lots of snacks, nice jazz playing in the background vibes. I don't really want to have to like meet any deadlines or anyone else's expectations. But if I can just kind of go into my own creative cave and work on the things that I actually want to work on, and rather than things, you know, that I decided I would do a week or two ago, if I can just really go with like, so for example, today I was working on some meditations that I'm doing for the next round of the training. And that's just the perfect creative task for me at this point in the cycle, because I can just tap away at my laptop and that just feels really good. So yeah, definitely feeling that like the enchantress creative energy combined with the deep hermit cave vibes. Like I'm looking at myself on the camera right now and I'm like, oh gosh, I look like my hair is brushed and I've put makeup on. I look presentable. And honestly, for most of the day today, I was just in my PJs. And I love that about this point in the menstrual cycle. I love embracing these might seem like they're in conflict, these parts, but actually, yeah, when you learn to work with them, particularly the archetypal energies, which we're going to get into more in this episode, yeah, it's so freeing. So I feel good.
Yeah. And I love almost extending that like period cave energy into like, your luteal phase. Like that's, I feel like the biggest life hack of all. It's just like, what if you just, went into the cave early and enjoyed yourself before anything else happened? It's like, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I had a really social few days towards the end of my inner summer. I had family come and stay. We had visitors. We had a meet up in Melbourne for Cycle Coach. So it was like a lot of a lot of people as well, right? You know, as I'm transitioning into my inner autumn. And so yeah, it's just right on time, honestly, to just now descend into introversion for a while.
Very on theme with the winter solstice.
It is. And that's right. Yeah. So it's the winter solstice here in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm in Melbourne right now, in Victoria, in Australia. And we are, we're celebrating the winter solstice. And I can definitely feel that solstice portal is open. I really felt it from the full moon last week. And it's interesting because I was in the UK in December for 6 months ago for the winter solstice. So this is like my second winter solstice in a row. So part of me kind of feels like it's also the summer solstice, but actually I would say that I'm definitely like the overcurrent of energy is very cozy and reflective and restful for me right now. But you are obviously in Scotland experiencing, I imagine, so much light right now. So what's happening for you as the summer solstice approaches in a few days?
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. If you've never been to Edinburgh, Scotland, I logically realized it was more north, but it never really clicked that I was like, oh, that means it's just light all the time around the solstice. Like I think it gets dark around like 11, maybe 11:30, and then the sun's coming back up around 2. And so it's just this weird season of just hanging out with friends and being like, what time is it? And you're like, oh my God, it's 10 p.m. I need to leave. Like, because it feels like that very like evening energy. And while, like you said, energetically, the winter solstice is kind of aligning with where you are in your cycle, it feels like, the summer solstice is really aligning with where I am because, summer, ovulation, that like mother archetype, just like, okay, yeah, as soon as June 20th kind of comes around, I've like always just been like, oh yeah, it's a little Cancer baby. Like I'm a Cancer sun too, and we're going to be Cancer suns together. And so I'm like, oh, there's that like crossover. It's baby season now. And like it's mother season. So yeah, I've just been kind of embracing the extra light because especially during the day, like I just notice energetically, like I'm more sleepy kind of in the afternoon. And so those evenings have been such a gift to be like, oh, it's still sunny. I can like go garden or I can go like be productive for a little bit before I sleep again. Yeah, it's feeling good. I also am planning to kind of celebrate the summer solstice. A friend of mine bought one of those like belly casting kits. So we'll get like a little messy and do a little DIY to kind of commemorate the changing body of, the boobs and the belly that I have now. All brand new. And it's very overstimulating at times. And other times I'm like, oh, it's so cool. There's a little alien in there. So hopefully they stay still and I can do this little cast on Friday. And Yeah, then they can come whenever they want, but I don't think it'll be before July.
Mhm.
Embrace that
Mhm.
solstice energy for myself before the world changes.
Yeah, celebrating that. Yeah, embracing the solstice energy for
Mhm.
yourself. I really feel that. And hey, how about this season? It's been so great, hasn't it? Lauren and I have shared so many messages back and forth with each other, just being like, oh my God, these episodes are so brilliant. These conversations have
Mm.
just been so awesome this season. And I'm really glad that we trusted our instincts and decided to just exclusively invite alumni on to come and talk about the work that they're doing. Because I mean, as a sticky beak, I just love hearing about what other people are doing in the world and how they operate in their businesses and the kinds of things that they're focusing on. And it was such a cool range of industries and stories and focus areas. And I think neither of us, wanted to stop. We
No.
just wanted to keep having these chats. And of course, we'll have season 3 come out once you're ready to come back to work. Yeah, what were some of the highlights for you from this season?
So many. It was such an interesting season going into it because I think we had planned to do like 6 episodes, and some of them were going to be like, would have multiple guests on, but we'd interview them. But then the conversations obviously just all ran long, and we're like, they'll have to be like, we had to have 2 mother episodes. Yeah, individual people speaking. And for myself, it was an interesting season because in season 1, I kind of knew all the guests. A lot of them were from my year, the 2020 graduating class. And so there was a bit of like anxiety almost for me of just being like, oh my God, there's people that like I'm interviewing on my own that I've never met. And some of them are just, I mean, all of them really. I think I told all of them before I hit record. I'm like, I'm just so intimidated by you because you're doing such incredible work. And they're, a bit of an icebreaker for everyone. There was like just giggles, but I was just like, but sincerely, there was just so many incredible women that I was like, I'm in awe of you. And so it was almost easier to kind of go into those conversations because I'm like, I'm just going in as like a curious fan. Like, I just want to hear like how you got into this work, like, what sparks joy in you, like what's like lighting you up right now. Uh, and then getting to hear the conversations that you had and be like, oh, I wish I was there. The one you had with Mel and like Daniela. And yeah, there was just so many nuggets of wisdom. And I just felt like my brain, especially like I said, in this season of life where I'm trying to slow down, I was just so inspired by these women because I was like, oh, I want to learn more about, like pole dancing, and I want to learn more about sexuality, and I want to learn more about even just like teaching children. And it was just like, there's all these, just portals of wisdom that I'm like so keen to leap into. But for now, I just have to live vicariously through our amazing guests. Yeah, what stood out for you?
I really loved that. I loved hearing Zainab speak about the
Mm.
language
Yeah.
piece. And that was so fascinating for me as somebody who only speaks one language and has attempted many times to learn others and has just never really seen it through. I can speak a tiny bit of German, a tiny bit of French, but it was just so incredible to hear about the way that she's reclaimed her mother tongue and learning about fertility awareness in English, but then going on to teach it in Arabic and choosing to exclusively teach in Arabic as well. I just thought that was so incredible. And hearing about the names for the female anatomy in Arabic that she hadn't heard before, it's just astonishing. I really, really loved hearing those stories. And what I felt, I think, most inspired by personally, in terms of something that really captured my attention and has stayed with me, is the conversation you had with Beth and Hannah around sharing this work with young people, because I haven't done really any menstrual cycle awareness work with young people. My focus has always been women.
Mhm.
That's who I've worked with my entire career, adult grown women. And so I noticed this little seed plant itself actually in my system,
Mhm.
hearing them speak about it. And I think it was the humor and the fun that I could tell that they have with these kids.
Mhm.
It really made me think, this is something actually I could see myself doing. So yeah, stay tuned. Let's see. But I could definitely see myself taking this work into schools more, which I've not focused on before. So that was really
Mhm.
cool. But of course, all of them all of them were such fantastic conversations that I'm really grateful to have. And it was really interesting to see the patterns come through and the thread of the archetypes come through in, I'd say, nearly all of the conversations in some way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that was definitely a common theme that I noticed. And it was just really interesting to hear the different experiences or approaches of how to like Yeah, like I said, like I think of like Mel with exploring sexuality across like all the different phases and like what each archetype would want. And Daniela with like that creativity piece. Obviously the two episodes on motherhood and just like going from that maiden energy into mother. And it was just like, yeah, it was really beautiful. It reminded me of being at psycho coach school and kind of meeting them for the first time and then getting to see how each individual woman has now taken these like four archetypes and made them their own and like evolved them and like brought them into the real world. It's quite powerful to witness that individuality in a very thematic framework, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and it is one of the frameworks that we teach at the school. So we work with the seasonal, we work with the archetypal, and we work with the lunar framework. And as you discussed with Zainab, different frameworks, they're like languages. They land with different people for different reasons, and they also all have a slightly different purpose and can be used in different ways. So I often find that the seasonal framework resonates with a lot of people, not everybody, but resonates with a lot of people pretty quickly, and it's a good one, I think, to start with. It's also it's a good educational framework, I think. And then the archetypal framework, it's a little edgier for a lot of clients, I find. And again, it's not necessarily for everyone, but when it's you really used effectively, and we're going to speak about 5 ways that you can use the archetypal framework with your clients. Gosh, it can create powerful transformation and quickly move things that I sometimes find the seasonal framework has limits on. Archetypes seem to really get into the heart of the matter and allow the client to embody whatever the qualities are that we're talking about or the kinds of change that they would like to see in their lives. There's a potential for more embodiment and more creativity and honestly a lot more power, I think, than sometimes the seasonal one can offer when it's the right client at the right time. What kind of relationship do you and your practice, either personally and also with your clients, have with the archetypes? What's it been like for you working with them?
Yeah, they definitely come up quite a bit just in the work that I do. I seem to attract a lot of creative entrepreneurs. There's a lot of both connecting to that creativity and then a lot of like manifestation practices as well. And so I like to use them almost as like a council, an inner council of women that we can connect to all of them. So I definitely play more with like the joys of the archetypes of just like their strengths. So it's almost like, yeah, you have a group of superheroes at your disposal, and you can just like call them in at different points of your life. Like I know personally, some of the biggest leaps I've made in my life is connecting with the enchantress because I was definitely a bit more of like a people pleaser, waited for like external validation or external permission. I'm like the youngest of 3 kids and like the only girl. So there was a lot of like protective people around me growing up. And then the last few years, it was definitely that like premenstrual enchantress where I was just like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to like book the plane ticket and fly to Scotland, or I'm just going to move. I'm just going to do whatever I want, basically. I'm really using both that season of my cycle, but also, yeah, that archetype. She's just been powerful. And then the other one, I love the crone, obviously. I'm a hermit for sure. But that maiden energy as well with like the creativity of just like reconnecting to play, reconnecting to crafts. Like I know with clients, I just had a client last week and I was like, what if, like you're a very practical woman, what if you made like the most glittery decision? It's just like that maiden archetype of like, what if you put glitter on it? And he's like, okay, you normally order black coffee, but what if you just ordered like the most obnoxious drink on the menu because you've always wanted to try it? And she's just like, but I was like, really? Like, it was just like channel that inner child, that like maiden of just being like, yeah, I want to wear, the big fancy dress on a Tuesday, or I want to like wear lipstick to, I don't know, whatever event you're going to. Doesn't matter. And those are obviously like tangible things. It's just fun to use them, like I said, as like outlets of our personality is, I guess, how I would play with them the most, of just like getting to basically like put a costume on and be like, it's obviously still you, but sometimes just being able to like break out of the routine that you're in to like inhabit another archetype for that season, even if it's not in this season that aligns with your menstrual cycle. So maybe you're bleeding, but you want to like still play with that mother archetype, or you want to play with the maiden, or whoever. It's just fun. As a former theater kid, it's just fun. Like, but what would they do? What would the enchantress do? Let's channel her.
Yeah. I think there's something in that, almost like on one hand, the archetypes give us a language to name these different parts of ourselves and to get to know these different aspects of ourselves as they emerge and fade across the cycle, right? And then on the other hand, there's also something about them because they are like archetypes are within like the social consciousness, like they are also separate to us. And so even though we might not be familiar with the Enchantress, as an example, once we start to learn more about her qualities of truth-telling and creativity and mysticism, for example, we might not necessarily be super familiar with those qualities, but we can start to get to know them in ourselves because it is almost like you say, putting on a role. It's like, okay, well, let me try this archetype on for size and then see how it feels and see what parts of myself emerge that I've never encountered before, or maybe I have in private or in the depths of my journal, or there's been a desire to explore those parts of myself, but I haven't had the language to do so. And working with a coach and working with a cycle coach to explore these different archetypes safely and with really fun experiments like what you're describing, from makeup to, what coffee you choose, to a conversation you might have with a partner or a friend, to how you show up each day in your life, trying on these different frequencies. And it's so brilliant the way that the menstrual cycle gives us an opportunity to play with these different parts of ourselves. And so for anybody who's listening who is unfamiliar with the archetypal framework, the one that we teach, and of course there are, so many different archetypes. We work with 4 at Cycle Coach School. And we start with the maiden archetype, who is the archetype of the pre-ovulatory phase, the follicular phase. So that's what we would call the spring phase for the seasonal framework is the maiden. We then move into the mother archetype, who is the archetypal figure for the ovulatory phase, the fertile window. We then have the enchantress, who holds the frequency for the luteal phase, the premenstruum, and then down into the crone. And these archetypes are also the crone for menstruation. And these archetypes are also reflective in the female life cycle as well, which we won't get hugely into today. We covered this a lot in the training, but the maiden takes us from birth to the age of 25, through menarche up until those years. The mother carries us from 25 up until about 50 at menopause. And then the enchantress carries us post-menopause from 50 to 75, and then 75 to 100 is our crone, who takes us right up until death. And I really find when I'm working with a woman and we start to get into the archetypes, things start to get really exciting and really fun. And I do find that for me in my practice, again, the educational piece usually comes through the seasons, whereas the archetypal piece usually comes more through one-on-one work, or maybe through small group work, where we can explore them together and have conversations about them and actually do some embodiment practices to feel into them and to explore them together in a kind of relational setting, rather than me just telling you what the archetypes are like. And there's really something in this work about embodying them. So let's get into 5 ways that as cycle coaches, we can really bring archetypal work into our client sessions or in group spaces. So the first one is, we've covered this already a little bit, but to name and navigate parts. So we are all made up of so many different parts of ourselves, parts that are very, very young, parts that have been with us from early life, parts that have developed according to different circumstances that we've been through or relationships we've been in, experiences that we've had. And something that I love so much about menstrual cycle awareness and cycle coaching is the opportunity to understand myself. It has been for me the biggest tool to really get to know who I am. And like I said earlier, to get to know who I am in each phase of my menstrual cycle. And also as I continue to go through my life in each phase of my life. I'm, well and truly in the mother years of my life. So with this knowledge, I can look back and get to know more about who I was as a maiden and now who I am as a mother. So it helps a lot, I find, when working with a client, if there's any internal conflict, and often it can feel as if these parts can be in conflict with ourselves. As an example, the maiden in us might have like a million creative ideas in the notes app, right? And might like looking at Lauren because she is the most like amazing creative brain, and so many, things in her notes app. And many people listening probably resonate with this of having a lot of ideas and having a lot of projects that you'd really love to have time to work on. And the maiden is just like, whoa, there's so much I want to do. And everything's so exciting and shiny and like, give it to me, and it's that beautiful like zest for life, that maiden energy. There's so much enthusiasm and innocence and a little bit of naivety as well. And the mother in us knows actually the power of committing, and knows that actually there's a lot of power in slowing down and in saying yes to maybe just one or two of those things on the list. And so sometimes these parts can be in conflict, right? Particularly if you have very creative clients. And I find that inviting a client to consider, which archetype is at the wheel, in this particular situation can be really helpful to just name what's going on if there is any conflict, or even to just give these inner parts some airtime and to allow them to be seen.
Yeah. And I think also sometimes finding outlets for them. I mean, obviously I have the creative brain. I have a flashback to a cycle coach gathering where we were reading a list I had made. It was like a workshop that Vienda, your friend, had done of just like, what are all the things you want to accomplish in your life? And I just got stuck on that question for like 20 minutes because I was like, it's endless. So obviously I tracked a lot of women who are very similar to me into my space sometimes. And it's just kind of redirecting that energy sometimes of being like, okay, the maiden's not going away. Like, she likes to be here and that's beautiful. Maybe she doesn't need to be in your business all the time. Like, you don't need to come up with a new offering. You don't need to like come up with a new freebie. Like, you have a beautiful like offering already. You have a beautiful like sales funnel. It's fine. Like, why don't you go take up a hobby? Like, go do a craft, like go do some dance classes, like just like be out. And it's just, yeah, sometimes rewiring the brain a bit to be like, especially if you are in that productivity spiral or being like, oh, I'm trying to grow a business, I'm trying to do all these things, I can only focus on this one project. It's like, no, like sometimes they just need to be taken out of their boxes in other areas. And that can be like, yeah, in your personal relationships, in your creativity, in your hobbies, like, or just going to the gym and being like, I'm going to wear a slutty little outfit. I'm going to go run on the treadmill, listen to Britney Spears, and then I'll come back and do my work like focused. Yeah.
Yeah. I really love that perspective that we can also give not only different phases of our menstrual cycle, it can be the domain of each of these archetypes, but different parts of our life. And so you're right. There may come times in business when your maiden needs to move aside and let some of the more mature archetypes in. And, it's not all the time, but there will definitely be phases for that, right? And I love that idea of giving her reign to be free in other parts of life. And I'm reminded as I'm speaking of a client I had years ago who had just become a mother for the first time and was really in the throes of motherhood and really missing her maiden and missing the freedom and the independence and honestly the lack of responsibility, just really missing that. And so we worked with how she could, keep her maiden with her. Right? These archetypes are with us all of the time. And so we worked on different ways that through her menstrual cycle, particularly in her pre-ovulatory phase, that she could really let her maiden be present in her life in ways that were possible within the new constraints of her life as a mum. And it was really powerful and it was really beautiful and fun to play in that energy again and to just get that permission. I could, sense in her that permission slip that although, she was well and truly had crossed that threshold into motherhood, her maiden still lives on in other ways.
Yeah. And I think they're a beautiful energy to kind of play with, as you said, across your cycle, because I think sometimes moving out of maybe a more patriarchal 24-hour, I have to like work within each day, everything has to be productively outlined to, that 28-day on average menstrual cycle. Sometimes people still feel like very seasonal, like I'm out of winter, so I can't be in that winter energy anymore. Whereas like when you bring the archetypes in, it can be like you're in the middle of your summer. Like, do you want to hang out with the crone today? Like, do you just need like a day to like hermit? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of gives us that permission to be the multifaceted women and menstruators that we are, that like, it isn't always black and white. It isn't always like each week is a phase and we have to like move on and connect with the energy. Obviously, the archetypes feel at home in certain weeks, but they are a nice resource to kind of be like, okay, today I just need to like, channel that crone. I just need to like have a cave day. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be back and I'll reconnect to wherever you are. But it just gives a bit of permission and a bit of guidance sometimes to clients and how they can step out of that cyclical framework.
This brings us really nicely to the next point, which is to support your clients through identity shifts and life transitions. So this might be separate to the menstrual cycle work, particularly if you're working with clients on rites of passage, if your clients are going through big transformations, which often in coaching they are. There's often a lot of growth happening and a lot of shedding of old beliefs and fears and adopting new perspectives and going after goals. And so archetypes really offer, again, this language during these big life moments. So we could use the example of perimenopause into menopause. So there's an enormous identity shift that happens as a woman is moving through her 40s, through perimenopause, right up until that rite of passage of menopause and beyond. And archetypally, we can look at this, as I said earlier, as a transition from the mother into the enchantress. And so there is opportunity here for these parts maybe to speak to each other, for the mother and the enchantress in a coaching session to have a conversation, and you can facilitate this, allowing your client to speak from each part. You could also provide journaling prompts for your client to go into each archetype to connect with the mother that is beginning to transform, and this new enchantress energy that's emerging, because these life transitions happen over a number of years. It's not a single moment, of course. So that, I think this can be really, really big work, honestly, working with archetypes during these big transitions. And I find it just so, for me personally, when I'm in a big portal of change and there's a lot of uncertainty, to tune into the energy that I'm perhaps growing out of, to really anchor into the one that I'm calling in. It's like, who am I becoming in this life transformation? Like, who do I need to be in order to make it through this to the other side? And that's when I think a coach can really support a client by bringing in these archetypes so that we can begin to work with the frequency of the one that your client is really stepping into. And you can do this so beautifully in sessions together, or like I say, to provide them with prompts to explore in their own time.
Yeah, it reminds me, I did a workshop with a small group, and it was just giving them the language and kind of introducing them to the archetypes. I'm a part of a very like witchy community here in Edinburgh. It's absolutely magical and you would love it. There's these beautiful women's circles that I go to, and we work with a lot of goddesses, and some of them are like the triple deity, like the maiden mother crone. And so I hear that all the time, and I'm just like, but there's a fourth one. There's a fourth one, which I'm like, is interesting because it is the, like, in my mind, the fieriest, most independent, most like sword wielding archetype at time, which is the enchantress. And I remember during this workshop, there was women who were like past menopause. And so I wanted to kind of include them. So I talked about the archetypes, and there was this woman who just had like the biggest like life altering moment of just like, she's like, I had a whole ceremony to like welcome in the crone, because she's like, that's who I thought I had to like be now. And she's like, I didn't really resonate, because she was like in her 50s. I'm like, you're far too vibrant to be welcoming in the crone yet. And so it was just like, no, like you have like a whole other archetype. And she was just like, this makes so much more sense. And so it's just like even giving those, like I said, that language of just what they might be feeling, and the themes they might be encountering, and seeing it in like conversations with friends of like, I'm at the age now where a lot of our mothers are in their enchantress years. And like chatting with a friend, and she's like, I just feel like my mom's not really like a mom anymore. She just like is doing her own thing and like doesn't really have time for me to like talk every day. I was like, where she is. You know what archetype she's in. She's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. It's like, your mom is an enchantress. She's no longer your mother. She'll be back. But it's just like, it could be like so, like life affirming. It could be like an unleashing for women to be like, oh, I actually can connect with this. Whether it is the enchantress, that's the one I've kind of noticed is a bit more of an aha moment with the women I have worked with. But it could be any archetype that all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, that's what I'm feeling, that shift, as you said, to a new identity. It could be Gotcha.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that fourth archetype. Gosh, I can't remember where I first read about this. Maybe in Miranda Gray's Red Moon. I honestly can't remember, but this shift in consciousness from the trinity of the maiden mother crone to include this archetype that takes, like we say, from about 50 years old to 75, or if we're looking in the menstrual cycle, the premenstruum, and how extraordinary it is to be able to acknowledge that enormous chunk of our lives, because perhaps we could theorize women didn't live for as long past menopause, centuries ago. Life expectancy was shorter. There wasn't a great deal of life after fertility ended. Maybe that's what's changed as an idea, that now that we're living much longer lives, there's actually a great deal of life that's happening post-menopause. Because to say to a woman, oh, your fertile years have come to an end, you're now a crone, is just madness to me, because you've probably got another 40 or 50 years, like, all going well, to be in the cronies. It doesn't even mathematically add up. And it's not true. Like, I look at my mom, she is 69, and she's not a crone. Yeah, she's traveling right now, like you're describing, with your friend. She's out in the world. She's like a great grandma, but she's still very nurturing because that's in her nature. We know that she'd be there for us if we needed her, but she is out doing things for herself in a way that she just simply really couldn't when she had 5 kids at home, So there is this freedom again. We have this lovely freedom in the maiden years and like no responsibility. In the enchantress years, there's still, of course, responsibility because you're a grown, human. But there is that freedom again that maybe isn't as present as much in the mother years. So I love the reclamation of this enchantress archetype. On my 30th birthday, I got a tattoo of these moons that is, if you can imagine, if you know the symbol and you could look it up, the trinity of the maiden mother crone, it's like a full moon. And then on either side of the full moon are 2 crescent moons, one's facing left and one's facing right. So that's the old like trinity of maiden mother crone. And I wanted to reclaim this enchantress energy and this like wild woman autumn energy that had been left out of this. And so I got flowers like down the side of the full moon with it within this trinity. And unfortunately, I did not listen to the tattoo artist at the time, who said to me, do not get it in this spot because your breasts are going to start to sag. You're 30. They don't sag right now. They will. And I got it right beside my boob. And I was like, don't you tell me, man, what my body's going to do. Like, this is where I want it. And he was like, it's also too small. He's like, you need to get this tattoo bigger because otherwise you're not going to see these leaves and flowers. Like, it's not going to work. And I was just like, don't you tell me what to do. I'm reclaiming my enchantress energy. Anyway, he was absolutely right. My body in the 9 years since has changed. And it is too small and you can't really tell what the leaves and flowers are. So I kind of look like I've got this maiden mother like crone symbol with this like black like just blur. That was meant to be me reclaiming this enchantress, and it's terrible. It's so bad. But, it really fired me up when I learned about this. It felt so important, and it does still today. It's just quite amusing every time I catch this tattoo in my reflection.
Well, you're like, the man. He's like, okay, but I am an expert in my field. And you're like, no.
Seriously, yeah. I'm like, what would you know about this?
What would you know about tattooing a woman? He's like, more than you.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a big lesson learned that day. Oh, goodness me. Shall we move on to the third point?
Yes, please.
All right. So the third way that you can work with archetypes with your clients and in groups is around decision-making and direction. So again, when we're coaching someone, we're usually, when we're going somewhere, one of the biggest differences between coaching and therapy in general, I would say, is that therapy can often really be about looking back, and it's a lot of reflecting and processing the past. And there's not as much, generally speaking, of a focus on moving forwards, whereas coaching does have more of that energy of visioning, goal setting, and wanting to transform something. And so we can use archetypes to check in with our clients around the decisions that they're making and the direction that they're moving in. So, for example, as simple as something as saying, once we've named these parts, as we did in that first step, being able to say to a client when they're making a decision about something, is that yes coming from your crone or from your mother, for example, or tell me how your enchantress feels about this situation, something like that, and beginning to name the parts for the purpose of taking action and for overcoming overwhelm in a session as well. Because again, when we're making decisions, often there can be a lot of overwhelm. There can be a lot of different conflicting feelings and thoughts going on for a client. And so bringing in the archetypes offer this lovely precision, and just being able to really go in there with a question like that, like, yeah, tell me how your enchantress feels about this. That can like really open up a lot. For somebody.
Yeah. And I notice for sure with like creative entrepreneurs, like I said, sometimes that maiden can kind of get a bit out of control of like, I have a new idea. And you're like, I'm so excited. But like using the archetypes as a counsel that you have to connect to over a month. So like slowing down that like process of like, I'm going to get this new idea out. And it's like, do you even like it? Like who made it? Who made this new idea? Like which archetype? And then like checking in with like all four ladies, because it's like you might get to your bleed and be like, that was the stupidest idea I've ever had. And your crone would be like, I know. Like, what are we doing? That is not in line with the vision. Or it's just like, or you might get to your enchantress and she might just be like, I'm sleepy and I'd rather like not start this new project. Or like, just like I said, using them as a counsel to be like, okay, like what is a priority? Because if you just let your maiden, or if you just let that mother, like that external energy, make all the decisions, or vice versa, if you're only connecting to the crone and being like, I don't want to do that because that's too much, then like the other women are like, but actually I think I would like to be like out in the world and would like to like be face to face with clients versus just doing stuff online. It can be like very encouraging to not only slow down that shiny new project, but to also just make sure that it's like resonating through your whole body and it's not just like your space brain running away with something new.
I love this term of the council, and I have this vision and this imagination as you're describing that word, of them all like lined up together, and to be able to bring in a counseling session with each of these archetypes during a coaching session. It's fantastic. Or in a group workshop space, to be able to give people an opportunity to voice each of these archetypes, to say out loud the guidance that each archetype offers, and then to notice the differences between them, to notice when they're in conflict, to notice when they're in resonance, and how they can support each other as well. I often find that my maiden and my enchantress are like allies. Like they really support each other, actually. I feel like one of my most vulnerable times in my menstrual cycle is definitely in my pre-ovulatory phase. I can get pretty anxious, pretty overwhelmed pretty quickly. It can feel quite sensitive around cycles day 7 or 8. And I have to say my maiden, my maiden is, she's really feeling pretty tender. Actually, the guidance that the counsel that I'm usually most benefit from is from the opposite side, to looking over to the enchantress and getting her, like, the fierceness around which she sets boundaries and the protection that she offers. I really feel like she supports me a lot during that time. So it's cool to see how they work together as well.
Yeah, because I do find, like, I think you taught me that, like, looking across the cycle, I do obviously think like all four are connected and like they're within all of us. But I do sometimes think of like the maiden as the same person as the enchantress. It's just like the maiden's grown up into the enchantress, the mother's grown up into the crone. They have very similar energies and outlooks on the world. It's just that like they have that maturity now. And so it's like, it makes sense to play with the maiden and then to be like, well, what does the enchantress think? Because it's just like the bigger sister, basically. To be like, hi, like I'm a bit more confident in myself. I have a bit more clarity on what I actually like. And you can kind of let them guide each other through different decision making.
So that was, adding decisions and direction, which is likely going to come up a lot with clients. The fourth one is, I think it's a really powerful one, which is working with shadow. So often in coaching, there's going to come a time where your client's going to be encountering their shadow, parts of themselves that they might feel more discomfort around, or shame, areas of their life where they might be really struggling, and parts that perhaps don't feel as integrated as others or as celebrated as others for whatever reason. We all have these parts, and we don't have time to get into it today, but each archetype also has a shadow. Each archetype has its set of joys and strengths and things to celebrate. So, for example, the maiden, she's incredibly playful and adventurous and is great to turn to when, you need that innocence. But there is a shadow side of, can manifest as manipulation, for example, or of just shirking off all responsibility and not taking ownership of things. And so it's really helpful, we explore this a lot in the training to explore the mature, the mature version or like the immature version of each archetype. And working with shadow with clients, I find that the archetypes can really help with explorations of these uncomfortable parts within ourselves. So, for example, the premenstruum is often a really uncomfortable time for a lot of women. Not everybody, but often it really can be, whether it's experiencing premenstrual symptoms or whether it's, something more severe like PMDD, or just really finding it to be an incredibly uncomfortable time. Working with the shadow and bringing in the enchantress archetype, for example, it allows us to hear what this archetype wants us to hear and what it wants us to witness. We can then begin to bring in this energy of the enchantress. So, for example, if you're feeling like your boundaries are constantly being crossed in the premenstruum and you're just trying to show up with the same energy as you have been for the week before and you're feeling exhausted, like you can bring in this archetype of the enchantress and look at ways maybe that the shadow archetype is manifesting, or ways that you can really bring in, some more of those strengths. And again, there's a kind of like impersonal nature to it that can sometimes facilitate these conversations, because often when we're working with shadow, it can feel very personal. And so when we can begin to have the language of the archetypes, it can sometimes, I notice, be easier to name what's going on, in those moments.
Yeah, I like that idea of almost like being able to look at yourself as the observer. And I think of like the conversation I had with Olivia around like the mother archetype and like kind of ending maybe generational cycles of just like what being a mom was. And even for myself, like I know it was very much like steeped in martyrdom and sacrifice. And so just kind of being able to like, sometimes look at yourself through a different lens to be like, what does this word mean to me? Like, what does this energy mean to me? And being able to like identify factors outside of yourself that can then bring clarity to your overall like experience of life, of just like how it's showing up even outside of your cycle, but also within your menstrual cycle too. Yeah. Or just even Dana doing her pole lessons through each archetype. It's just like, processing grief and moving things somatically through pole and dance. It's just such a powerful way to connect and celebrate those like shadow sides.
Yeah, I really I'm glad you brought up Olivia's conversation around the mother, because I think that is probably, they all can all be misunderstood. But I think the mother is often really, really misunderstood, because we can have quite a fraught relationship with the mother. And there's a lot there. There's so much there. And again, it's way more than we have time to get into today. But I think that's the archetype that I usually see women needing to define for themselves the most. That's the one that often, because I'd say for a lot of the women I work with are between the ages of 25 and 50. So they're in those years themselves. Maybe they are a mother of biological children, or maybe not. They may have, they'll have some kind of relationship with their own mother. And then there are, like you say, a lot of expectations and stereotypes about what a mother is and what a mother does and how a mother shows up in the world. And so I think this is the one that really often does need to really be redefined for that person. And I loved how Olivia spoke about that, about in that first conversation of the season of the wild mother, and how she redefined that archetype for herself. And so I would encourage anyone listening, you can play with these, you can give them new names or evolve them or adapt them for yourself in a way that feels empowering for you. If for some reason the word mother really lands terribly in your system, you can sit with that shadow of why that is, definitely. You can also rename it entirely. It could be the season of the creatrix for you, or the lover archetype. There are lots of other archetypes that you can play with at that time. Yeah, the shadow is real, and I often see this too. with clients who are really struggling, say in relationship during the premenstruum. That's the time where they just lash out at their partner or their kids, where there's just so much anger and frustration and a sense, honestly, I would say most of the time of not wanting to be cruel, but finding themselves saying things they don't really mean and lashing out and causing harm as well, to themselves and to others. And I think it can be really tough for relationships. And that really is the enchantress in shadow, because she's not really being given a chance to really, to have her boundaries set and to really, share her truth in a healthy way. And perhaps there hasn't been time for her to self-reflect and to nurture herself, or perhaps she overgave during the mother phase of her cycle. And now there's this resentment that's coming up. So I think when it comes to shadow work, which will always come up in cycle coaching, this is when the archetypes can really support whatever changes need to be made.
And I think sometimes with clients, it can be hard to notice when it's a shadow, because there is that expectation of like I said, like coming out of your menstruation and that cave energy, that crone energy, and then being like, well, I should be this way because I'm in my pre-ovulatory phase. I'm that maiden phase now. And it's just like, but if you're not, are you feeling that way? Like, or so it's just kind of sometimes noticing like when the should sneak in, or like when they're talking about this like usually extroverted, sparkly energy. And it's like, but your eyes are dead right now. Like you're tired. So what is the what is that shadow side of the maiden or the mother that makes you feel like you need to be social if you're not wanting to be so, or whatever it is? It could be like in any phase, but just kind of noticing when there is that like, I need to be like this. And it's like, yeah, but if you're not, then let's unpack that. Let's hold space for that, because yeah, if anything, menstrual cycle awareness, cyclical living, like it should not be shoulds. It shouldn't be like performative for anyone. Like that's what we're trying to move away from.
Yeah, and so often that maiden just really needs to be told that it's okay to rest as well, right? To not have to always be on, and actually to be cared for, and to learn, again, coming back to the mother archetype, to mother ourselves and learning how to mother that inner maiden. I think that's got to be such a strong theme through a lot of the work that I see in my client sessions, is really like, often it comes back to those tender parts, sweet tender parts.
Yeah.
So the fifth way here,
you're good.
The fifth point, the final point we have today to discuss around using archetypes in your cycle coaching sessions, is embodiment and creative expression. And really, this is the fun stuff, and this is the practical to a lot of the theoretical that we've discussed. So certainly you can go back and forth with a client discussing the different frequencies and qualities of each archetype and educating them, and inviting your client to share with you verbally about, what their inner maiden is currently thinking or feeling, etc., as we've discussed. But I really believe that in order to really activate these frequencies within us, we do need to practice embodiment with them. And this can happen in lots of different ways. I really like using dance and movement and music. And so I have playlists that I use for myself to really get into each archetype. It helps it to kind of switch on in my system. And I like sharing those with clients, or even asking clients to make their own playlists. I think that's quite a fun thing to do. For anyone who's quite visual, I think Pinterest boards or collages, that kind of thing, can work really well. So using art and creativity to like actually make something that reflects, how you experience that archetype. They're the ones I usually go to. Like I said a couple of times, I think journaling can also be really powerful as well. So we do this in my course Flow. We practice writing a letter to ourselves from each of the archetypes as we move around the menstrual cycle. And I think journaling. So they're my kind of go-tos. Journaling, I would say movement, using music, and then being quite creative and visual to actually really, feel into them. We do a lot of imaginative journeying as well in the training. And so inviting clients into that kind of meditative, imaginative space where they can meet their archetype, meet that part within themselves, and spend some time with them on the imaginative planes. Well, how do you normally bring the embodiment and creative archetypal piece into your client practice?
Yeah, a bit of both. So for myself, I definitely notice that like shift more through like my creative writing, and I kind of like let them guide, the ADHD brain. I'm never going to write a novel in a linear fashion or a structured fashion. And so I find, depending where I am in my cycle, it's just like connecting to that archetype to be like, well, what do you want to write? Like, and it's interesting how each phase, it's so very different, where like I find in that like enchantress energy, she just wants to like read it and like hone it and like use the language and like edit it and make it even better. The mother just wants to write like smut and dialogue and just like flirty. She's just like, yeah, there's just different phases where it's like all of a sudden I'm like in that creative, like, I'm just like describing the scenery and like, yeah, using a lot of like really big words. And it's just like, and like bringing that kind of curiosity and like observational, almost creativity to client work. It's just like I said, I attract a lot of creative entrepreneurs. I also attract a lot of women with ADHD. And so I like kind of like to like unleash the chaos a little bit, because I think sometimes people with ADHD, they're like, I just need structure. Like, I just need a plan that will work. And I'm like, there might be a plan that works. I haven't found it. So it's just like allowing the archetypes to kind of be like almost like, what was that movie where it was like all the villainous like superheroes? They're like, oh, the Suicide Squad. I'm just like letting them kind of be like part of the creativity to be like, if you are creating a course from scratch, it's like, first off, give yourself way more time than you think you'll need, because it always just takes longer. But then letting each archetype bring in their gift and being like, don't necessarily think the mother's going to sit on the computer and like type out dialogue. Like, what does she want to do? Does she want to be out networking? Then go network, like go tell people about your offering, like, like allowing them to really shine and to bring their own gifts into your work. It can be kind of fun just to like almost think of like, whereas I said before, they're a council, they could also just be like your different personalities, like an inside out where they're all in your brain. It's just like, sit with them in the morning, connect with them. What do they want to do? Like, what's their part in this group project? And let them like, take the lead, obviously within like reason. Usually it's like when the best work comes out, because I'm just like, yeah, why are you trying to force yourself to like sit inside or to like, or to go out and be social if that's not what you're feeling, to really allow them to like guide that creative process. It can be kind of fun just to, be chaotic.
What advice would you have for anyone listening who'd like to incorporate archetypal work into their cycle coaching practice more? Maybe they know about the framework and have learned about it, but haven't yet brought it into their client work.
I would say don't be afraid of it and don't be so black and white about it. I think coming through Cycle Coach School, we do some really beautiful meditations where we get to meet these parts of ourselves. And that's a great introduction. And then as we saw across all these interviews this season, and even just in our conversation, then you can just take them and they can be your own. Like, there's no one watching you to be like, that's not how you work with the mother. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we can be like, oh, I just don't want to like introduce them because I don't want to like misrepresent them. And it's like, no, this is kind of like a creative form. It's a language. And so like introducing menstrual cycle awareness, as we said at the top, sometimes the seasons are just that very easy. It's like learning your first few words in the language. And then the archetypes can be that creative flourish. They can be the metaphors. They can be like, that like kind of those words that you get stuck into and that create meaning, create visuals. But it can be a collaborative process. You can introduce them to your clients and then they can make them their own as well. Like, they can look however they want. They can speak however they want. It doesn't have to be like, constrained or in a box. Like, these are the frameworks that we can use that can break us out of that very like linear thinking process.
Yeah. I would agree. And I would definitely say to stay curious about how your client encounters this part of themselves and how that archetype wants to be expressed. And as you say, it might be very different to the experience you've had with yours. I do think it's important, like everything, to have explored it for yourself first. Absolutely. Right? Like to know these different parts of yourself and how you connect with them and so on. But then to kind of let go of all of that, honestly, like as you go into a space where your client is really getting to know these parts of themselves. So there's a balance, I'd say, between sharing on the qualities and sharing, who these archetypes are, and then stepping back, and actually really leaning back and allowing your client to invite this part of themselves forth. and then seeing what emerges. I think your curiosity creates a really non-judgmental space that's, I think, so important, because there can be a lot of fear around how these parts might be judged, particularly if they're ones that haven't been explored yet much in their life, right? So I think, yeah, that non-judgmental, curious tone, and if it helps to share some stories, if you're the kind of coach who likes to divulge some, you might like to share some anecdotes from your own experience about how you've related to each archetype, give them a few things to play with, and give them total permission to leave what doesn't resonate with them and to claim what does. And I think that can just, you don't need to know everything. Yeah, you don't need to be an expert on this stuff. It's just really creating a space for your client to show you these different parts of themselves. And it's such wow, what an honor, hey, as cycle coaches, that we get to witness our clients being so vulnerable with us in this way.
Yeah. And I think exploring the archetypes with your clients is like a masterclass in cycle coaching, where it's like you want to teach them, you're going to introduce it, and then you do need to step back and you do need to just like hold space and witness what's coming up for them. Because like, my experience of the maiden in my life cycle will inform my pre-ovulatory phase, and they might have a very different outlook on the maiden. Or like I said, I love to connect with my enchantress to make decisions. Other people might like to connect with the crone or whatever it might be, and just like allowing them to discover what that is for them versus you trying to be like, well, this is what this means. It's like, no, they'll have their own experiences and they'll resonate with the archetypes as they can or as they will want to. And as you gave permission as well, they might choose different archetypes. And that's just as creative and magical and transformative. So allowing them to kind of lead that is where the magic happens.
I think this is a really nice place to finish our conversation. Really glad that we decided to end the season on this topic. I'm going to run through the 5 points that we've covered just for clarification. So the first one was to name and navigate parts. So that self-awareness piece. The second is life transitions and energy shifts, which are absolutely going to be coming up in your client sessions. Then we have guiding decisions and direction, so moving forward in the coaching container. Number 4, we have working with the shadow. And number 5, the embodiment and creative expression. Is there anything else we haven't covered on the topic of archetypes? I mean, there's so much, but is there anything that you feel like needs to be named before we finish?
Nothing specific, but I think once again, just that permission that while we introduce these 4 in Cycle Coach School and they are brilliant places to start, there are hundreds of archetypes. So even just for yourself as a coach, explore them and see how they inform different parts of your business. Like I know I connect with different archetypes for manifestation versus creativity versus like just existing in my romantic relationship. Yeah. So it can be kind of fun as you age to evolve the archetypes and to bring in more women to your council or just people. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Outside of the training, what are some of the resources you've encountered that have been the most beneficial in learning about these archetypes?
That's a good question, actually. I haven't found any, I'm trying to think. I think it's more just my own curiosity of Googling different archetypes, definitely exploring them through the lens of different goddesses and how they've kind of resonated with them. But it's mostly just in conversation, I would say, that the new ones, and I'm like, ooh, who's that? And then sometimes it's, it's not even a formal document telling me what an archetype is. It's just me being like, I feel like this today. And I'm like, that is an archetype. I feel like a queen, and the queen is an archetype. There you go. So allowing yourself to, invent your own, and what a beautiful art project too, to like paint yourself as different archetypes.
Yeah, I think, I think film and TV has been a really big teacher for me. Like once you start to see them, then you start to see them everywhere. Often like the enchantress or even the seductress, the mother, the maiden, these archetypes play out storytelling because, it's how we tell stories. And so you'll start to see them. And I quite like finding like different, like Mrs. Weasley, is the first one I go to when I think of the mother from Harry Potter. I mean, she's one expression of the mother, but, that's a mother archetype that I often I often think of. And so you'll start to notice them. I think that's been really helpful for me. I would also say Carolyn Meese's book, Sacred Contracts, she really gets into so many. They're not exclusively feminine. They are like, across the board. And there's so many different ones in there that I found really helpful. Of course, like Carl Jung's work, like he spoke so much about archetypes and named these archetypes as well. So there's lots of varied places. Like I said earlier in the episode, Miranda Gray's book, Red Moon, I think that was the first place I first encountered, like I said, that enchantress archetype who came into that maiden, mother, and crone. But again, the education can only take you so far, and the theory is helpful. But what's really going to transform things for yourself and for your clients is getting to know how these frequencies come alive within your own being. So take the time to get to know them.
Joy.
Okay. Well, let's finish up the season.
Yeah. I can't believe it's the end. We'll be back very soon with season 3. So yeah, if there's any topics or people you think we should interview, please let us know, because we're already coming up with ideas on our own.
Yeah, we are. And you know what? This is a bit of a sneak preview, but there probably will be a bonus episode coming out. We're not done. No, there is a topic that I do still really want to cover. It'll probably just be a solo one with me because Lauren will probably have a tiny human to take care of. So let's just say maybe you're going to hear from me again soon. But in terms of us hosting the show together for now, for season 2, we are complete. So thank you so much for tuning in this season. It's felt awesome to keep this creative project alive. We both love working on it and we love hearing from you. So please come and send us a message on Instagram or leave a comment, send us an email. We really love hearing your feedback and how you're finding the show, and your reviews really, really help us stay motivated and wanting to create this podcast for you. So big love and solstice blessings wherever you are in the world. And I hope that your midway point of 2025 brings you a great deal of space and time for reflection and celebration, and any pivots, if you need to make them, to take you into the second half of this year feeling good. Yeah, big love.
Yes. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Cycle Coach Show. If you loved what you heard, then please review, share, and subscribe to help us reach more cyclical listeners like you. You can find us on Instagram at Cycle Coach School or online at cyclecoachtraining.com.